pale dawn climbs over the highlands and the wind carries a promise of reckoning. Fraser stands at the ridge, quiet as stone, and every scar on his body tells a story that leads to this day. If fate demands a price, he is ready to pay it with honor. Mist moves across the heather like a living thing, slow and patient, and Jamie watches it drift over the glen he has bled to defend. The ground feels known under his boots, the kind of known that comes from years of love and loss, the kind that binds a man to a place stronger than iron. He draws a slow breath that tastes of rain and peat, and his hand finds the worn leather at the hilt of his sword. Behind him, the land rises like a shield. The hills quiet, the pines steady, the birds holding their voices in the hush before a storm. He thinks of Claire and the warmth of her hands, the way she laughs when she tries to hide her fear, the way she calls his name when she wants to pull him back from the edge. He lets that memory rest in his chest like a steady drum, a rhythm that keeps his heart from breaking. At Lallybroch, the hearth is still warm, and he sees the glow in his mind, yet he knows the road before him will lead away from light. A rider comes with word of movement in the valley, and Jamie nods once, calm and firm. He gives the man a look that says everything a laird needs to say. Hold fast, keep watch, protect the young and the old, then turns back to the ridge and the waking day. The air sharpens. In the distance, a faint thud rises, not thunder, not hooves, but the dull weight of men gathering their will. Jamie listens, not only with his ears, but with all the years that brought him here. He rolls his shoulders and the scar at his neck pulls a little, a reminder of what he has survived and what he can still endure. He kneels, presses his palm to the soil, and offers a silent vow to the land and to the woman who made this place a home. If the storm must come, let it meet him standing. If the dark must fall, let his fire be the last light to fade. He rises with the certainty of a man who has chosen his path, not because it is easy, but because it is right, and the ridge holds him like an old friend as the day breaks open. The air inside Lallybroch feels heavy, as if the walls themselves know what is coming. Claire moves through the dim light with quiet steps, watching Jamie from across the room. He sits at the old wooden table, sharpening his blade in slow, measured strokes, each pull of the whetstone ringing like a warning. His face is calm, almost too calm, and that stillness frightens her more than rage ever could. She has seen him fight before, seen him bleed and rise again, but there is something different now. It is not the fire of youth that burns in him. It is something colder, older, like the deep roots of the hills he calls home. Claire sets a hand on his shoulder, and for a breath he pauses, yet his eyes do not lift from the steel. She wants to tell him not to go, to beg him to stay, but the words catch like stones in her throat. Outside, a wind stirs the leaves and rattles the shutters, carrying whispers from the glen where riders gather in secret. Old allies have returned, men who once swore to never take up arms again, yet they stand now in shadowed corners, speaking low of honor and of debts that cannot be left unpaid. Jamie joins them beneath the ancient oak, his voice low, his gaze unyielding. They speak of enemy movements, of supply routes and hidden paths through the hills, their words cold and sharp as the edge of his sword. When he returns to Claire, he carries silence like a cloak. He walks through the house, touching the walls with his fingertips as though memorizing their shape, as though saying goodbye without speaking it aloud. That night he stands alone in the courtyard as clouds choke the stars. The moon glints off the scar that crosses his chest, and for an instant he seems carved from stone. Claire watches from the window, her hands trembling against the glass. She knows she cannot hold him back. He is not only hers. He belongs to the land, to the ghosts of those who died for it, to the promise he once made to every man who followed him. And if this is to be his last stand, he will walk into it without fear, even if her heart breaks with every step he takes. The first crack of musket fire shatters the stillness of dawn, and the glen erupts into chaos. Smoke curls like black ribbons through the heather as the enemy advances in tight formation, their boots pounding the earth in a rhythm that echoes like distant thunder. Jamie rides at the front of his men, his hair tied back, his eyes fixed on the hills ahead. He carries no banner, only the weight of every soul who stands behind him, and the quiet fury of a man with nothing left to lose. The air smells of iron and ash, sharp enough to cut the throat, and the cold wind lashes at their faces as they charge down the slope. Steel collides with steel in a ringing clash that shakes the ground. Jamie dismounts mid-stride, sword flashing in the half-light, and meets the first wave with a roar that tears from somewhere deep inside him. His men follow, shouting their clan's names, their voices raw and fierce as the clash swallows them whole. The battlefield twists into a blur of color and movement. Flashes of tartan, streaks of blood, glints of blades slashing through the smoke. Jamie moves through it all like a force of nature, striking with precision, blocking with brutal grace. An enemy bayonet grazes his shoulder, and he answers with a sweep of his blade that drops the soldier to the ground. He does not pause. He does not falter. Each swing carries the memory of Lallybroch, of Claire's laughter, of the children's feet pounding across wooden floors. The clang of steel becomes a drumbeat, faster, harder, until it is no longer sound but pulse. Around him the tide of battle rises, drowning out everything but the will to stand. His kilt is slashed, his hands streaked with blood, yet his eyes burn bright as wildfire. He fights not to win glory, but to make this ground sacred, to carve his defiance into the earth so it will remember his name long after the wind erases the footprints of every man who falls. A hush cuts through the roar of battle, a sharp stillness that feels like the breath before the world breaks. Jamie staggers on the ridge, his side torn open by a blade, blood soaking through the wool of his kilt. Yet his grip on the sword does not loosen. He plants his feet as the enemy closes in, their ranks tightening like a noose around him. Smoke rolls low across the field, curling at his boots as if the earth itself mourns what it is about to lose. He lifts the Fraser banner with one trembling arm and drives its pole deep into the soil, the cloth snapping in the wind like a living thing. The sight halts his men mid-retreat. They see not a wounded man, but the spirit of their clan made flesh, and for a heartbeat, fear bends beneath the weight of his defiance. An enemy captain calls for surrender. Jamie answers by raising his sword high, voice raw as he bellows their battle cry into the storm of gunfire. Bullets whip past him like angry hornets, slicing the air, yet he does not move from that hill. Each step the enemy takes toward him is met with steel, with fire, with the unyielding fury of a man who will not let this ground fall while he breathes. Below, Claire breaks through the shattered lines, her skirts torn, her face streaked with mud and tears. She calls his name, her voice drowned by cannon blasts, but somehow it finds him through the chaos. Their eyes meet across the smoke, a fleeting glance that holds a lifetime, and in that look she gives him the strength to stand one moment more. The enemy surges like a dark wave, and Jamie disappears into it with his sword blazing, a lone figure swallowed by thunder and flame, choosing to be the wall that will not break even as the world crashes against him. The battlefield lies silent now, wrapped in a gray hush that feels heavier than the clash of war ever did. Smoke drifts low over the heather, clinging to the ground like sorrow made visible, where the roar of muskets once split the sky. Only the faint cry of distant crows remains. Claire walks through the ruins with slow, shaking steps, her boots sinking into the mud still dark with blood. Broken blades jut from the earth like gravestones, and the torn scraps of tartan flutter weakly in the breeze. Her eyes search every fallen shape, refusing to blink, refusing to accept the emptiness pressing in around her. In her hand she clutches Jamie's sword, its edge chipped and blackened, the leather of its hilt worn smooth by his touch. She presses it to her heart as if holding his hand one last time, her breath catching like a sob she cannot release. The sun edges through the clouds, weak and pale, casting light on the ridge where he made his stand. The earth there is torn open, the grass scorched, but the banner still stands, its fabric shredded yet defiant, whispering in the wind. Claire kneels before it, fingers trembling as they trace the Fraser crest, and a hollow ache fills her chest. The echoes of his voice seem to stir with the breeze, soft, steady, unbroken. She closes her eyes and lets that ghost of him settle inside her like a final heartbeat. Around her, the glen is quiet again, as if holding its breath, and in that stillness she makes her vow. She will carry his name, his fire, his love, through every shadow that dares to follow her. She rises, her grief sharpened into resolve, and walks from the field with her head high, the sword gripped tight, leaving the ridge bathed in new light, where his spirit stands watch forever. Nights at Lallybroch have grown colder, though the hearth burns bright. The halls feel wider, emptier, echoing with memories instead of footsteps. Claire moves through them like a soul caught between two worlds, her body here but her heart lingering on that battlefield. Every creak of the old floorboards makes her turn, half expecting to see him leaning against the doorframe with that crooked grin. The scent of pine smoke and leather still hangs faintly in his study, as if he has only stepped out for a moment. She sits at his desk where his maps lie scattered, lines of ink marking the hills and glens he loved. Her fingertips follow his handwriting, strong and sure, and it feels like touching the outline of his soul. At night she walks the fields where he once rode, her lantern swaying as moths spiral in its light. The wind carries whispers through the trees, soft threads of his voice weaving with the rustle of leaves. She closes her eyes and listens, standing still until the world narrows to the sound of her heartbeat and the echo of his. Villagers speak of seeing him on the ridge at dusk, a lone figure where the heather meets the sky. They say the crows fall silent when he appears and the air sharpens like steel. Claire does not tell them she believes it. She simply stands at the window in the deep hours, watching the ridge, waiting. Sometimes when the moon rides high and the mist coils low, she thinks she sees him there too. Broad shoulders, wild hair, head unbowed against the wind. And in that fleeting shape she finds the strength to go on, knowing Jamie Fraser is not gone. He has only become part of the land he fought for, watching from the hills, whispering her name on every breath of Highland wind. Years pass like the turning of pages, soft and unstoppable, and still his presence clings to every stone at Lallybroch. Children who never met him run through the field shouting his name in play, their voices carrying the echoes of the warrior who once stood unshaken on the ridge. The tales of his last stand have grown into legend, spoken in quiet tones by the fireside when the nights run long. They say he fought like the storm itself, that the ground shook beneath his feet, that he stood when every other man had fallen. Claire listens to their words with a soft, knowing smile, her eyes distant, warmed by memories no song could ever truly capture. She tends the garden he once planted, the roses blooming wild and stubborn as he was, their roots tangled deep like his love. In the evening, she walks the ridge where the Fraser banner once snapped in the wind. Now only the heather sways there, yet she can almost feel his arm slipping around her waist, the brush of his breath against her ear, the steady thrum of his heart. She speaks to him in whispers meant only for the wind, telling him of their children grown and strong, of the world he left yet still shapes. And when the sun sinks behind the hills, painting the sky in fire and gold, she knows he is there in the quiet, woven into the land, the legacy, the bloodline that will never fade. Jamie Fraser may have fallen in battle, but his spirit stands eternal, guarding the Highlands, guarding her, guarding every soul who dares to love as fiercely as he did.